All right. All right. Anybody that wants the transcriber one, you can turn that on if you like, or you can turn it off. Let me see. Okay. So thank you all for being here. This is the first of the 8-week cycle of Buddhism 101. So last week we talked about the history of the Buddha. Does anybody have any questions or comments about the history of the Buddha or what we're going to do with Buddhism 101? Any questions in general? Okay, good. All right, very good. So hi there. Is that Arya? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, this is your first time joining us?
It is, yes.
Oh, well, very good. Well, I haven't met you, but I look forward to meeting you sometime soon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes. So does everybody have a 101 book? Now, Arya, you are not likely to have one of these books yet, but if you want one, you can email me and I will mail you one, or you can meet us down at Dharma Surya. Where do you live, Arya?
I am living in Orange County in California.
Oh, wow. Well, this is a real stretch. So
Yeah, where are you guys at?
we're in the Virginia, Maryland area, most of
Oh,
us.
wow.
Yes. How did you hear about us?
Through my friend Zara.
Oh, Zara, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Well, if you'd like to continue to join us and you want one of these prayer books, as I say, send me your mailing address and I'll send it to you.
Oh, awesome. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Have you done any Buddhist study up to this point?
No.
Okay. Well, then this will be a good introduction for you.
Great.
Okay. So this is the beginning of our 8-week cycle of classes.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we begin by reciting our opening prayers. And our opening prayers are designed to help us to set our intention, our motivation. And generally, our motivation is for the enlightenment of other beings. So everything that we bring into ourselves, we're not keeping for ourselves. It's kind of flowing through us to all sentient beings, and we can help all sentient beings. So this particular first prayer, the altruistic motivation, of course, altruism is our brotherly, sisterly love that we have for each other. And this states that, it's easy for us to have a motivation to want to help our brothers and sisters, our family, our mothers and fathers, and so on like that. But strangers and people that mean us harm, it's much more difficult for us to want to help them. But nevertheless, that's what we need to do. So this particular prayer helps us to set that motivation. The other motivations, the other prayers will, as we go along, we'll explain a little bit more about each one of them as we go along. But this one is for the benefit of others, that we do these, we attend these teachings, that we do our studies, that we do our practices, and that we ultimately attain enlightenment for the benefit of other sentient beings. So we read this prayer twice in English, and then we'll recite it once in Tibetan. Our particular group is a Tibetan Buddhist group. It's part of what we call the Vajrayana, the wisdom tradition of the Buddha Dharma. So we go into a fair amount of detail, and so any questions you have, you can interrupt me. I don't mind. But if you write them down and we talk about them at the end of the class, or when I take a break and ask people for questions, that would be a really good time. But if you have a burning question and want to ask it right away, don't hesitate to turn your microphone on and speak up. Okay, so we begin this prayer. Everybody recite along with me, please, that has the book, and out loud. It's important to be able to connect our physical body, our vocal cords, our lungs, with our intellect, with our brain. And that opens up our heart center. So our body, our speech, and our mind. Our speech is our intellect. Our mind is our heart mind, our heart center. So we recite this prayer twice in English, once in Tibet. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Dagla dangwa je pe dra no pa je pe ge. Dar pa dang tam she ken pe bar du jo par je pa tam she ki so je pe. Ma nam ka dam yam pe sem chen tam she de wa dang den. Dog now dang drel nor du la na me pa yang dag par zog pe zhang zhu brin po she to par ja. Next prayer is called the Action Bodhicitta prayer. Bodhicitta is translated as the holy enlightened mind. Two Sanskrit words. Bodhi means enlightenment, and Cheetah is the heart mind, the big mind. This is the brain mind, the little mind. So the enlightened heart mind. This is bodhicitta, and putting the enlightened heart mind into action for the benefit of all beings. So this is exactly what we talk about in Buddhism 101, to be able to recognize our bodhicitta and how it is that we actualize it. So we recite this prayer once in English and once in Tibet. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Deshe du sang ma ge ge bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Ma she bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. Du de ring ne song te ni ma sang ta sam gi bar du lu na gi sam ge wa la ko. The next prayer is the long refuge prayer. Taking refuge is something that we do, is like going home. It's what our home base is. And for us, our refuge is the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha is the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who we talked about last week, and you can see on YouTube if you want to go through and see the life story of the Buddha. So the body of the Buddha, the mind of the Buddha is the speech of the Buddha, and that is called the Dharma teachings. The Dharma means a pathway. So the Buddha Dharma is the pathway to attain Buddhahood. And the third of the jewels is the Sangha, is the community of people, the community of beings who are following the Buddha Dharma, who are on the path to become Buddha themselves. The Buddha taught that we are all Buddha, that we all have Buddha within us, but it's our confusion that blocks up our recognition of that Buddha nature. So what we're trying to do is to remove those blockages. So this long refuge prayer articulates the three jewels, but also mentions our lamas, our teachers, and also mentions the deities of the mandalas. The mandalas are like palaces. So beings who are on the path are creating their palace, creating their Buddha field, so to speak. And on that are these, what we call deities. They're not gods, but they are wholly enlightened beings who are on that path that we are putting onto, that we're bringing into our mandala, into our palace. So we talk a lot more about this, but this long refuge prayer articulates this. So we say this twice in English, once in Tibet. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. We take refuge in the kind root and lineage lamas. We take refuge in the deities of the mandalas of the Yidams. We take refuge in all the exalted Buddhas. We take refuge in the perfect Dharma. We take refuge in the excellent order of the Sanghas. We take refuge in all the noble Dakas, Dakinis, and Dharma guardians, possessors of the eye of wisdom. Tren san sa wadang gur je pe pao dan lama dam pa nam la kab su chi o. Yedam kil gorgi la sok nam la kab su chi o. Sangye chon den de nam la kab su chi o. Dam pe cho nam la kab su chi o. Pa pe ge du nam la kab su chi o. Pa wo ka jo cho kyong song bei song yeshe gi chang dang dem pa nam la kab su chi o. The next prayer is called Taking the Bodhisattva Vow. So a Bodhisattva is a wholly enlightened being, is a human being who has put themselves on the path of purification to attain Buddhahood. So a Bodhisattva is the wholly enlightened being. Bodhisattva, Bodhi means enlightenment, and Sat means a being, and a Sattva, Va means a holy being. So it's the wholly enlightened being. So we're taking a vow to become a wholly enlightened being, to complete ourselves as a human being. We have a physical body, we all know that. We have an intellectual body, we all know that. But we also have a spiritual body. And this is what we're here to recognize, to learn how to recognize and to be able to actualize, to be able to activate for our benefit and for the benefit of others. So this prayer states the vow that we take for ourselves to be able to make a commitment to be able to attain being a bodhisattva. So we are holding the three jewels at our heart, the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha. So when we hold our hands, our thumbs are in our palms like this to help us to remember the three jewels. And it's at our heart center that this is at our heart center. This is our true nature. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Until I attain the heart of enlightenment, I take refuge in all the Buddhas. I take refuge in the Dharma, and likewise in the assembly of the Bodhisattvas. As the previous Buddhas embraced the enlightened mind and progressed on the Bodhisattva's path, I too, for the benefit of all sentient beings, give birth to bodhicitta and apply myself to accomplish the stages of the path. Zhangzhu Ningpo Chi Ki Ba Sangye Namla Kapsu Chi Jitar Nongi De Shegi Shangshu Tugni Ki Padang Shangshu Sempe La Pala De Dagrim Shin Ne Patar De Shin Drola Pendandu Shangshu Semni Kigishin De Shin Du Ni La Pala Rimpa Shin Du La Paji. The next prayer is called the Short Refuge Prayer. And this is the refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So when we recite this, we visualize that at our forehead is symbolic of the body of the Buddha. The body of the Buddha is the Sangha, is the group of the community of people that are following the Buddha. And our throat is the speech of the Buddha. So we visualize that is the intellect. The speech is a function of our intellect. So we recognize that as the speech of the Buddha. And the Buddha, the mind of the Buddha is at our heart center. So we often go Om, Ah, Hong, in the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So these are the three jewels. These are the three jewels of the Buddha. So the body, speech, and mind. So it's an important thing that we begin to be very mindful of everything that we do. So this short refuge prayer brings that to mind for us. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chonamla Shangju Bardu Dagni Kapsu Chi Dagi Jinsoki Pe Sonamgi Drola Penshir Sangye Jupasho. So the last of our opening prayers is on page 6 is the 4 immeasurables. These are the 4 vast immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. Bodhicitta, the holy enlightened mind. And all the enlightened ones, whether they're Buddhist, whether they're Christian, whether they're Islamic, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Hindu, whether they're Taoist, whatever tradition they follow, have these 4 qualities. And the 4 qualities are loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, and equanimity. So we'll talk more and more about these in greater detail, and we repeat this over and over again because this is a fundamental teaching of bodhicitta to understand the qualities within ourselves and to be able to exalt those and to be able to actualize those. So these are the 4 immeasurable qualities of that. So we recite this prayer. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. And may they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe gurdang dempar churchi. Dugnal dang gunal gi gudang drawar churchi. Dugnal me pe dewa dang mi drawar churchi. Nei ring jak dong ni dong dwell way dong namla ne pa Georgie. Okay, those are our opening prayers to set our motivation, our intention to receive these teachings and discussion. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of the prayers that we recited? Okay, so one of the main fundamental functions of Buddhist training is for us to recognize our ego and to be able to let our ego attachments go. Our ego is grasping for identity. Our ego is grasping for attachments, for pleasure things, is trying to have power and so on in their families, among their friends, in their workplaces, and so on like that. So that ego is what keeps us from being able to recognize our true nature. Our true nature is pure and is completely selfless. It's not selfish. Our selfishness is our ego. Our selflessness is our Buddha nature, what we call Buddha nature. So we give the ego a job. The ego, we can't destroy the ego, but we have to be able to control the ego. So we give it a job. We understand what we want to have happen, and we use the ego to do that, but we do it with a high degree of unattachment. Even the spirituality recognition that we may be able to develop, we treat with a great deal of respect and a great deal of unattachment to be able to let that go. What we're trying to do is to raise our consciousness, raise our level to the level of space, to be able to be free, to be able to be pure, to be able to be calm, to be happy, all these things. So this is what we are working for. So last week, we talked about the life of the Buddha, and the Buddha began his teaching with what's called the Four Noble Truths. So I'm going to put this up as a screen share. So you might want to, I can put it, so right now I'm just going to put it on as a screen. Whoops, how did that get there? 1 second. So everybody can see that, I hope. The Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Okay. So you can move your pictures around if you like to leave room for this, because I want to start with this because this was the first teaching that the Buddha gave after he attained enlightenment. These Four Noble Truths were something that he sought for his enlightenment. This was the motivation for his enlightenment. He wanted to understand suffering. So the first noble truth is that all existence, all beings have suffering. Doesn't matter whether you're young or old, rich or poor, a man or a woman. It doesn't matter who you are. There's suffering in all life. Doesn't mean that your entire life is suffering, but it means that even the things that you consider to be pleasures and that you work very hard to obtain and so on can ultimately turn into suffering for you. So we'll go into more detail with this later. The next is the cause of suffering is our desire. is our desire for identity, our desire for ego, our desire for attachments, our desire for riches, for power. All these things is central to our being a human being in the first place, because we choose this life. We are the architects of our life, and we become the engineers of our life. So we'll talk about that, but it's an important concept that we come to over and over again. We wanted to be born. So therefore, we have this life, and now we have to navigate our way through this life. The third of the Four Noble Truths is called the cessation of suffering, is the unattachment to the ego, the unattachment for our grasping, the unattachment to clinging to things, that we have to cut ourselves off from the things that we find that are pulling us down. They're like a ball and chain that are weighing us down. So we need to be able to recognize those things and to be able to cut ourselves off. Zara, welcome to our meeting tonight, and please turn off your microphone if you would. So the cessation of suffering is unattachment. Now, how do we do that? You know, that's a big question. So the answer to that question is the fourth noble truth, which is, the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is the means for ending suffering, the means for the cessation. So it's like a guidepost for us, or a series of guideposts for us to be able to constantly be evaluating our lives, who we are, what it is that we're doing, and what it is that we're trying to accomplish in our lives and so on, what our goals are. So this Eightfold Path is articulated here. It says it's right view. So the right view, you look at the bottom panel here and you see right view is the freedom of enlightenment. All beings want to be free. It doesn't matter whether they're a human being. It doesn't matter whether they're a wild animal or a domesticated animal. It doesn't mean, a being also means insects. Any living being that has a lifetime is born, can be subject to sickness, is subject to old age, and is subject to death, and has some kind of consciousness about themselves that responds to stimuli. Some things it likes, it's attracted to, and some things it has aversion to, it repels from. This is a general definition of what it means to be a sentient being. Of course, for us, at the top of that is being a human being. So what we are trying to do is to use our human life, our human beingness, to be able to recognize that not only do we have these physical and qualities and these intellectual qualities, but we also have spiritual qualities. So this is what leads us to the freedom of enlightenment. So the next of the Eightfold Path is to have the right resolve. And the right resolve is the perseverance for enlightenment, that we keep working at it, the resolve, that we make a commitment to do this. And some days it's very easy for us, but some days it may be very distant and difficult for us. But nevertheless, we have to persevere. We have to work at this to be able to do that. And this actually becomes our protection. If we were aware of the things that we want to accomplish, when the negative things pop up and begin to cloud our view, cloud our life and so on, we have that, it's like an umbrella that our resolve keeps that those obstacles from penetrating and becoming a strong force in our life. We're able to work with them and to resolve them. The next one is to have right speech. Right speech is to always pronounce the truth. If we don't tell the truth, we're of course lying. And when we begin to believe those lies ourselves, we begin to delude ourselves as well as deluding other people that we know what's going on. As human beings, you know, we have a great deal of wisdom or intelligence, at least relative to this world. But in this world, we tend to become arrogant. We become conceited because human beings are at the top of the consciousness level on this planet. So we tend to think that if I think this, it must be true. So if I tell this, I'm telling something that is true. But meanwhile, it may be a lie. It may be something that I fabricated. It may be wishful thinking, all these things. So to keep us from having to keep track of all these stories that we make for ourselves and for each other, if we always tell the truth, it simplifies our life. It simplifies our path to becoming pure, to remaining pure. So if we don't know something, we tell the truth and we say, I don't know. And that's the mark of a truly wise person. And then that wise person, if they don't know something, but they want to know, they have to educate themselves. They have to go and find ways to be able to find out what that particular truth is that they want to understand. And maybe it's not within their ability to be able to know that, because we do, as human beings, have our limitations. And to be able to abide within our limitations and enjoy our life as a human being and not get too far out in front of ourselves. So we'll talk a lot about that. The next of the Eightfold Path is right conduct, that we behave with purity, that everything we do is to not harm other beings, whether it's other human beings, whether it's animals, whether it's insects, to have respect for all sentient beings and to not harm them, but also not to harm nature, not to harm the world around us. That we have this great gift of being on this planet, and we need to look at this planet as an extension of ourselves. We are part of the planet is part of us. And likewise, the whole entire cosmos, all what we call nature and so on. So we always have to behave with purity. And if we do that, we stay on a path to become a bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being. The fifth of the Eightfold Path is right livelihood, our connection of all endeavors, that everything that we do, we know that we're part of society. And we're interconnected with people. We can't live by ourselves. We have to share things. You know, the shirt that we wear, the shoes that we wear, the things that happen to maintain our streets, our cars and so on. We can't be expected. We can't do all these things for ourselves. We can't make our clothes all the time. We can't be fixing the road all the time. We can't legislate laws for ourselves. There's a lot of things that we can't do, and we have to depend on each other. So, but what can do for ourselves, or what we can do in that mix, is to find what makes us happy, what keeps us balanced, what gives us a sense of community where I'm giving something that's worthwhile and I'm taking things that are being given to me from other beings and so on. So this right livelihood is being in that balance. And that balance shifts throughout our life. What works for us when we're 20 years old may not work for us when we're 30 years old. And likewise, when we're 30, it may not work for us when we're 40, but something else does and so on. So we see that our life does change. So right effort means that we're always moving forward, that we're cultivating wholesomeness, that we're making value judgments. We're looking at virtue and we're looking at non-virtue. And we want to be able to avoid non-virtue. We want to be able to discard non-virtue. We want to be able to bring non-virtue into our lives, but be able to neutralize it, that it becomes wisdom, that it becomes virtue. So we have to cultivate wholesomeness. And this effort is that we're moving in a forward direction. We're purifying ourselves. We're becoming the best human being that we possibly can. And we're using the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path and this whole tradition as a means, as a system by which we judge ourselves, that we guide ourselves with this. And we make the necessary changes to be able to affect that. The number 7 is that we have the right mindfulness. The right mindfulness is that we're being aware, that we recognize what we're doing. We recognize if we're doing good things. We recognize if we're doing bad things. We recognize things that we're doing with our body. We recognize things that we're doing with our mind, with our little mind, and we recognize the things that we're doing with our big mind. So we think. We can't stop thinking. We contemplate, which is a guided thinking. And then we may do meditation, where our guided thinking, our concentration becomes a meditation. Our meditation is where we transcend our everyday consciousness, our everyday thoughts, our everyday experience as a human being, and we suspend that, we let that rest, and then we transgress, or not, we go beyond that into our meditative state, into our big mind. And this big mind is where our true nature is. This is what we call our true nature. So in Buddhism, we call it our Buddha nature. But that is not exclusive to Buddha. It's also our Christ nature. If we happen to be a Christian, it's the Christ nature. We could call it God. In Judaism, they have another name for it. In Hinduism, they have many names for it. In Taoism, they have another name for it. So in all these different traditions, they all have this true nature, and they all have a different name for it, but the true nature is the same thing. It's the essence of our spirituality, the essence of who we are as a sentient being, as a human being, as a spiritual being. So this right mindfulness allows us to be able to become mindful of that, to work towards that. And then the last of this is the right concentration. This is the absorption into the Dharma. This is the absorption where we're concentrating all of our efforts, our physical efforts, our intellectual efforts, our spiritual efforts into the path of becoming a holy being, whether it's a Buddha, whether it's the Christ, whether it's Jehovah, whether it's Krishna, whatever being you take as being symbolic of that true nature, that we're following, that we're absorbing ourselves into that direction and so on. So these Four Noble Truths are a technique for us to be able to contemplate, for us to be able to focus on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. And what we're trying to accomplish is our spiritual awareness, our spiritual body. So to put this in other terms, we have 3 bodies, which I've said: our physical body, our intellectual body, and our spiritual body. So it's like a 3-legged stool. And a 3-legged stool will stand by itself. But if you only have, or are only working with your physical body and your intellectual body, it's a 2-legged stool. And you know that's not going to stand very well by itself. It's going to fall out of balance as soon as somebody bumps into it or something like that, or if it doesn't have proper grounding, it's going to tip over. But if you have a third leg, if you have that third part, that third body, that spirituality, now it's self-supporting. And this is becoming a complete human being, because we find that our spiritual body affects our physical body, and our physical body affects our intellectual body, and our intellectual body affects our spiritual body. If I don't feel good, I can't think very well. If I'm sick, I can't think very well. I can't work, I can't perform well, and so on. And therefore, I couldn't meditate. So if I can't think well and I can't meditate, my spiritual body's not going to work very well. But if I find that many of my illnesses, many of my physical illnesses, and many of my mental illnesses, my intellectual illnesses, are rooted in not having a stable spirituality, a stable understanding of who the essence of who I am. and what we are in, this nature that we're all in, we find that spirituality can heal many of our physical ailments, can heal many of our intellectual ailments. And so that we see that we become a super person, a superman or a superwoman. And this term has been used by many philosophers over the years. And that's what we're trying to become, is a superman or a superwoman, a being who is a complete human being. So we'll talk about this theme many times as well. So this was a review of the first teaching of the Buddha. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this? Take a little drink of water if you don't mind. So part of Buddhism 101 is as a discussion. It's not entirely a lecture thing. So we encourage that people, form questions or make comments and so on to keep the connection going, the dialogue going and so on. Another part of Buddhism 101 is to learn how to meditate, how to develop a personal practice. So we may not do that every single session, but there will be some sessions coming up where we will devote to developing a practice so that you can start to practice meditation on your own at home, and also to invite you to come to our center in Virginia, in Fairfax, Virginia, to join us there at our temple. And or maybe that you go to some other temple, you go to a church near where you live or where you are, and or to join us on Zoom when we do practices. There are times when we just do meditation or Data yoga practices. So we encourage you to do that, and we guide you as to how to do that. So in Buddhism 101 in particular, we've got 3 questions that we're always trying to answer. What, why, and how. So the what is the academic, what is suffering? What is cessation? What are the Eightfold Path? The things that we just talked about. And then we talk about the why. It's important to know why we do these things, why we learn these things, and so on. And so we try and make that connection. Every time we introduce a what, we try and introduce the why at the same time. So you're making those connections. And also, we try and develop a pathway of how it is that we become the embodiment of this, how we bring it into ourselves. This we may not do every single session because that involves the meditation and so on, the practice and so on. But you'll see that through time, by attending all of this, you'll see how these 3 come together and then become the fundamental aspect of learning what Buddhism is. Buddhism is a system. Buddhism is a philosophy. Buddhism is not a religion. If you look up religion in a dictionary, somewhere along the list of definitions, it's likely to say something like that religion is a human being's relationship to a supreme being. So what we might call a God or something like that. Somebody who, a supreme intelligence who created this or something like that, a supreme creator, something like this. In Buddhism, we don't know. People might say, oh, I've had conversations with that supreme being. That supreme being has talked to me, or I am the supreme being, and so on. And that's wonderful. We rejoice at that, but for many of us, we haven't had that kind of an experience. But we find that it's not necessary to have that experience to become a good person, to become a good self, to understand what we as an individual are doing and what we are doing as a group of individuals and so on. So by recognizing that, we are recognizing our interconnection, our spirituality. So if you look up spirit in the dictionary, spirit means interconnection, connection with each other, connection with nature, connection with the world, connection with all these things to become a spiritual person. So this is a philosophy of connections. This is a philosophy of spirit, of understanding the spirit, how the spirit works within us, how we can recognize that, and how it is that we can become the stable in that and radiate that to all beings in all directions. So this is an important distinction, because people ask you, you tell them, oh, I'm attending this 101, this Buddhism 101 class, and they say, oh, I don't believe in the Buddha's God, Jesus is God, or Yahweh is God, or something like that. And you can say, well, that's true, because Buddha is not a God. Buddha was a human being, just like us, who discovered a way to liberate himself, to be free from suffering. And isn't that what we all want to do? That's the first of the right views, that we want to be able to be free from suffering, so that we can be free to enjoy enlightenment, to be enlightened and so on. So this is what the Buddha is teaching. The Buddha can't give you enlightenment. We can't plug you in and give you enlightenment. You have to work for it yourself. So what the Buddha did, realizing that, was he gave a system of teaching how he experienced his purification, how he experienced his liberation. And this is the Buddha Dharma, the pathway. And this is what we follow. What we find is that we bring this into ourselves, and that there is a Gary Dharma, and there is a Jason Dharma, and there is a Ryan Dharma, and there's a Lance Dharma, and there's a Hatley Dharma. Each one of us has our own Dharma path. But if we were left to our own devices, we're likely to get lost in places and plateau at certain places and so on. So it's important and very wise to accept a system, to accept teachers, to accept guides, to help us to develop our wisdom of recognizing what our pathway is. So to be a Buddhist follower is not to negate your being a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or any other tradition. It doesn't negate it at all. The two or three of them can all work in parallel with each other. I consider myself to be a Buddhist. I consider myself to be a Christian. I consider myself to be a Jew. I consider myself to be a Hindu, a Taoist, all of these, because I'm a spiritualist in my essence. So, and I think that everyone working to realize their own true nature will discover that for themselves. So that's what this is about, to help you to guide your own way to be able to find your liberation from suffering, from attachment, from aversion, and so on. So now we come to the next part of our discussion. And that part is, what is suffering? How do we get suffering? Why do we have suffering? What is that? So the Buddha taught from the time he was about 35 years old to the time he was 80 years old, something like that, depending on what book you read, that he died when he was in his 80s, maybe he was 81, 2, 3, or 4, or whatever. So for about 50 years, he was traveling around what is northern India, much of which is now Nepal. And he was traveling from village to village, and he had this entourage of people who were following him. And some were, drifting out, and some new ones were coming in. But he spent these 50 years traveling about giving teachings. And the teachings he was giving, of course, is this Buddha Dharma that we talk about, the speech of the Buddha and so on. And he was answering many, 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 many questions. So people would come to him and they would say, "Oh, Buddha, here is my story. Why am I suffering with this? Or why am I suffering with that?" and everything. And everybody, so all this time, he's meeting all these people and so on. And everybody has their combination of sufferings that he's relating to them. So in general terms, we can't be specific about it, but they say that there was 84,000 emotions that were being expressed to him by all these people. 84,000 emotions. And some of these things were very common that they all shared. Some may have had, some peculiarity about them or something like that. And that these 84,000 could be, compartmentalized in certain groups and so on. And there are people who like to spend a lot of time figuring things like that out. Personally, I'm not one of those, but I look at things, I try and find the core meaning of things. And then if there's something that really interests me and I want to, drill down into it, I can take the time to do it. But I'm trying to understand things in a general sense first. And that's how we're trying to present this to you now in a general way. So these 84,000 emotions can be distilled down to these compartmentalized groups and so on. And then those compartmentalized groups can be further brought down into other groups, into smaller groups and so on. So finally, these 84,000 emotions can be brought down to 5 poisons. And these 5 poisons and all their myriad combinations make up these 84,000 emotions. So we go through a course of a day, and we may go through 5 or 6 emotions, sometimes more emotions, sometimes no emotions. But nevertheless, in order for us to be mindful of these emotions, what these emotions are, and why we have these emotions, and how it is that we develop these emotions is very important to us, because this is how we free ourselves. This is how we liberate ourselves. When a disease presents itself into nature, the doctors and the scientists, for them to effect a cure, have to find out what the root cause of that infection, what that disease, what that illness is. They have to go and discover that, and they have to go through a whole process to be able to do that. They may along the way find all these masking band-aids and temporary solutions to ease the symptoms, but nevertheless, they're not getting to the core root of what the cause of those diseases are. So we do the same things with our emotions. We sometimes put band-aids on them, and we take pills, or we drink booze, or we smoke some pot, or we do something to be able to mask our frustrations, our anxieties, our confusions, and so on, to temporarily relieve ourselves of our suffering. However, if we can train ourselves to recognize the root causes of what those 5 poisons are, and be able to liberate ourselves from any attachment to them or any aversion to the results of them, then we are becoming successful at being able to, like a doctor, finding some kind of an inoculation to be able to cure our illness of suffering, so that we become happy, we become peaceful, We become complete human beings who are satisfied. So the question then becomes, well, what are these 5 poisons? So the 5 poisons, I'm going to put up a screen share. Excuse me, it's not this one. Excuse me a second. Whoops. Okay, so now we can see these 5 poisons. I presume everybody can see this. So, okay. So the 5 poisons, so we're going to look at the 5 poisons, the 5 antidotes, and the 5 wisdoms that come out of this. So the 5 poisons, the first one is desire or attachment. The next one is hatred or anger. And the next one after that is jealousy or envy. And the next one after that is greed or pride. And the one after that is ignorance or delusion. So these are the 5 poisons. So these 5 poisons come to us through our egos, come to us through our desires. They contaminate everything that we're thinking, everything that we're doing. So the first one is the desire, that we want to have this life, we want to have this body, we want to have these possessions, we gain this self-aggrandizement. We look at ourselves as being happy or successful or anything like that by the possessions that we have. We identify with those, the clothes we wear, the house we live in, the car we drive, all these things and so on. So a great deal of our time, of our effort goes into sustaining that desire and to acquiring those things and so on. The next thing would be hatred and aversion. So hatred and aversion comes from the idea that if you're not me, you're other. And by being other, you are a threat to me, because as I'm omnipotent myself, all by myself. I know everything I need to know because I'm an arrogant human being. But there's this great space between me and you. But what we're trying to do is to overcome that space. That space is permeated with hatred and anger. This is how we sustain this separation, by saying, oh, that person is not as good as me. That person causes me harm. So therefore, I don't want to associate with that person. And if that person comes too close to me, I get angry and I will repel that person. I will repel that situation like that. So that becomes a very powerful poison in our lives. You know, you can become a very virtuous person doing many good things, many good deeds for many people. And then all of a sudden, some circumstance rises up where you get enraged, or you see somebody else doing this, becoming enraged. And for a moment, all they need to do is just enact that rage, and everything changes. Their life can change. Another person's life or another group of people can change and so on, all in an instant, just because someone didn't have the mindfulness, the wherewithal to be able to recognize their hatred, their anger, and that we're all the same. We need to recognize that. That's very important, that we're all the same. So we'll see how that progresses in just a moment. Right now, we're identifying these 5 poisons. The next one is jealousy or envy. And we may look at things, we want to have things that other people have. We may want to have their job. We may want to have their house or a house like theirs or a job like theirs. We may want to have a spouse who is involved with somebody else. Or maybe we have a spouse, but now that spouse is talking to somebody else and is inflaming my jealousy. I can't deal, what are they talking about? Are they talking about me? They making a rendezvous, something like that. Jealousy is very insidious, the way it lingers in the back of our mind. And envy, that we envy other people, that we envy the possessions they have. We envy their bank account. We envy their position in life. We envy the fact that they can take a vacation every couple of months and go to exotic places where I can't do that. So I envy their family or whatever it is. There's jealousy, and envy is one of the basic root poisons. And think about how much time we consume ourselves when we are inflamed with jealousy and envy, along with any of these other poisons. So the next one is greed or pride. Greed and pride. Greed and pride means that there's a degree of success where we have been able to acquire some things. Maybe it's possessions, maybe it's money in the bank, maybe it's a car, maybe it's family, maybe it's a job, maybe it's responsibility, maybe it's stature in the community, something like this. We become greedy with it and prideful with it. Oh, I've got this, and I'm better than anybody else because I got this. And, I walk into the workplace or whatever, and I'm the manager, and when I walk, everybody, gets quiet and everything. And when I say something, they say, yes, sir, and all this. And I become very prideful of that. I become very greedy with that because I don't want to share it. I don't want to share my success. I don't want to share the money I have in the bank. I don't want to share my possessions. I don't want to share my family. I become very greedy with it. I hold it onto myself. And I know that maybe, it's going to help somebody, but nevertheless, I need it. I might have $5 billion. I could never spend $5 billion in my lifetime. But meanwhile, I want $10 million now. If I got 5, I want 10. And this is part of the human condition. And we know people like this. We ourselves may not be exactly like that, but there are people in the world who are like that. And I'm sure that you know some yourself, if at least by reading things or by seeing it on TV and so on. And maybe we've experienced that within ourselves. We don't want to share our job. When we get a job and we get a certain set of skills to maintain this job, and you've been in this job, it's taken you 5 years in this job to get the proficiency that you're at, and you got job stability and so on. And they bring in a new person and they say, oh, here, Lance, I want you to train this person to do the job that you do and everything. And I think to myself, well, gee whiz, this guy's going to take my job. So I may go through the motions of teaching them some things, but I'm going to leave out some special ingredients. I'm not going to tell them some of the special things that I do that have given me the success that I have because I'm greedy. I don't want to lose my job. So we see that greed and pride becomes a very fundamental poison in our lives that creates all these emotions that we have. So that's 4 of them. The 5th one is like the granddaddy of all these poisons, is ignorance, is delusion. It's this ignorance and this delusion of holding, of thinking that I am special, of trying to make me, I, me, mine, that everything revolves around me. This delusion that if I take care of myself, everybody else has to take care of themselves. This ignorance of not knowing that there is so much more to life. There's so much more to being a human being. There's so much more to enjoy by being free and being able to be happy and being joyous. There's so much more to that than there is being desirous all the time, being attached to all things, being hateful, being angry all the time, being jealous all the time, having envy all the time, being greedy, or having this pridefulness and so on, and just being in this shell of darkness. We don't even know what it is that we don't know. That's how self-absorbed human beings can become. And when you meet somebody who has a degree of happiness, a degree of freedom about them, maybe it invokes something within yourself. You say, that person has something that I think I would like to be like them. When you meet somebody who's really selfish, somebody who's really mean, somebody who's really greedy and everything, do you think to yourself, oh, I want to be like that guy. That guy makes me really happy. Or that woman, I really want to be like that woman. Or do you think to yourself, wow, that seems very miserable. I don't really want that. I want to be happy. I can be happy with a lot less than I have now. I don't need a lot of things, but I get caught in this merry-go-round. I get caught in this whirlwind of having to do things and get things and display things to prove my value to myself and to other people. So this ignorance is all that combined. So we say generally that the three basic poisons is the ignorance, the hatred, and the desire. And then the jealousy and the greediness kind of come out of that. So it's important to be able to organize these things in your mind. I hope you're taking notes, because some of these things may be new things that you haven't thought about. Maybe you have thought about them, but to be able to reflect on these is very important. We talk about developing a practice. And what are we practicing? We're practicing freedom. We're practicing these elements of what it is that is enslaving us as human beings, thinking that we need all these things. We're being pushed around by all these poisons, we're contaminated by these poisons, and we're full of anxiety, we're full of wanting other things and so on like that. So by taking notes is going to help you. If we were together, I could hand out some sheets, but it's not that convenient here on Zoom. So, for myself, when I've been in these kinds of teachings, I take very good notes, and most of the time I record these things, for myself. And we're recording this now, and it's going to be available to everybody on YouTube. So you can review this later on if you want. And you could hook up a digital recorder if you want to your speaker output or your headphone output, and you can be recording it, and you can play it in your car while you're driving someplace. These are things that I did and things that I know many other people did, where we use the technology to help us to speed up our learning process, which develops into our practice and so on. So we part of our practice is studying, is thinking about these things, contemplating these things, and so on. So now we come to, does anybody have any questions, comments? Is it making sense?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, who's saying that?
Viviana.
Yes, dear. What is it?
I said, I wrote this down. Something that has made me feel passionate about my life is desire, because when I face apathy, I remind myself that I want to be educated. Oops, sorry. That I want to be educated and that I want to be active, and that would pull me through a lot of responsibilities I had and keep me energized. So how do I separate myself from want and desire, but also keep the, persistence, I guess?
That's a really good question. Thank you. And the technique I use is aspirations. I separate the word aspirations from desire. And I look at aspirations as a more of a virtuous wanting. It's having a goal, having a direction to move in that is steeped in virtue for the benefit of other beings. And if it's first that we have to take care of ourselves before we can take care of others, well, yes, we need to do that. That should be common sense. When you're on an airplane and they're taxiing and the flight attendant is giving everybody instructions, if catastrophe happens and the face mask comes down, put it on yourself first. You've got to save yourself first before you can help somebody else. So it's true here. But so we need to have aspirations that we want to do things to help other beings. Instead of saying, I desire this for myself, for my selfish aggrandizement. So if I can separate those two in that way, it helps me to move in a forward direction in a purer way, in a more pure point of view. Does that make sense? Does that help you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
Were you looking for another answer?
No, I mean, that kind of answered my question. Yeah, because I was just confused if it was like all encompassing, like it doesn't matter what kind of desire, but I think that there is a healthy amount.
Yeah. So everything we do as a spiritual being, because we are a spiritual being, has the component of doing for others in it. So everything that we think about should have that component in there. If I want this, am I wanting it purely for myself? Am I wanting it to help other people? What am I going to do if I succeed in this? Is this success going to help me help other people? So that is a fundamental mindfulness technique that we use to help us to do that.
Can you hear me, Lance?
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
Hey, okay, so I have a question. So if we have something that we feel is troublesome, that troubles us or is disturbing in terms of, for instance, say, new technology that's coming up that we find that could be really bad for a lot of people. Like I'm looking into something right now and it's disturbing me, and I have an aversion towards this certain technology that's coming up that I could see being really harmful to a lot of people. That's just going to be accepted and swallowed by the masses. So what, how can I expose that without feeling prideful and without having aversion to that which I'm trying to expose? Or should I just let it go and not even think about it?
Well, I think there's maybe a combination of both of those things. If it becomes an obsession, I mean, that's a problem. It shouldn't be an obsession. If we can abide in a high degree of our stability of being happy ourselves, despite that this is happening around us, there's a lot in the world that we don't like. And we're not going to be able to fix hardly any of it. Not the least of which, this future technology and so on that you're speaking about. So if we can find our space of balance in that, but then find a mode in which we can articulate our being able to maintain that balance that may affect other people, to help them to see, oh, there is another choice besides this obsession with this technology. You're not going to change people from chasing the technology by saying, oh, this technology is bad, this technology is bad. I think you're going to do it better by saying, oh, I'm happy without this technology. I don't need this technology. This technology leads to many other things that are unhealthy and frustrating and so on like that. So if people can recognize that, they may make their own decision that they don't need to follow that technology. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
Does it make sense?
A lot. Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good question. Anyone else have a comment or question? Okay. Does anybody need a break? Anybody want to stand up and stretch, get a drink of water or something like that? We can take a couple minutes right now if you want to do that. Otherwise, we'll go right back into our discussion here. All right. I will assume everybody's happy and we can move forward. Okay. So I want to make a little note about if people feel, well, I've been doing meditation for a while, you're thinking this and everything. And what is this meditation? So just as a general thing for right now to help everybody, if you're doing that, can you sit in what we might call quietude? And that quietude may mean that you're in a room, you're in a space, you're outside, someplace you can't stop all the noises around you. But within you is a certain quietude, this peacefulness and so on. And thoughts may come, you may hear sounds and everything, and these thoughts and these noises, these sights may come through and you recognize them, but in your quietude, they don't stop. They just kind of come in one door and out the other door. And you just let that happen. This is one of the techniques that we use to develop our daily practice, to develop our meditation technique and so on, our contemplation. So if you find that you're trying to sit and you're not getting that quietude, there's a lot of noise going on and so on, maybe you need to take a deep breath, a few deep breaths. You inhale, you hold the breath, you let it go, take another deep breath. Maybe you take 10 deep breaths, 20 deep breaths or something like that. Something to help you to develop that quietude. Maybe you close your eyes. Maybe you find something very nice and peaceful to gaze at. Maybe it's a flower, or maybe it's just the lawn, or maybe it's a lovely design on the carpet in your room or something like that. But something to just focus upon that's quiet. So I just make that suggestion to you. So now we've identified the 5 poisons. So now, how do we overcome those 5 poisons? What are the techniques to overcome those 5 poisons? So I'm going to go back to the screen share. So for the first one is desire and attachment. The antidote is what we call the faults of samsara. Another way of saying that would be the faults of nature. The faults of nature. The faults of nature would be the things like, I'm going to turn this off because I don't want you. The problem with putting things like out, people start reading, they stop paying attention to you. So the faults of samsara, or faults of nature, is we forget about old age. We may be attracted to someone and say, oh my goodness, how wonderful they are, how beautiful they are, and so on. And then think, oh, if I was with this person, how happy I would be. But then when you think to yourself, you know what, in 20 years, that person's going to change. In 30 years, that person's going to change even more, and so on. And those faults of nature are going to take place, and they may not be as attractive to me now or to me in that time as they are to me now. Their personalities are going to change, their physical appearance is going to change, their needs are going to change, all these things are going to change. So when we see that nature has all this change in it, and so those things that we desire, those things that we become attached to, how are they going to maintain in this sea of change and all this opportunity to change and so on? So this can be a way in which we overcome our attachment. So, you know what? I would like to have that, but it's not worth the commitment that I got to make to whatever that is. You know, if I have an attachment to this car, I want to buy this car, but then I buy this car and I got to think about, well, if I want to buy this car, I got to get insurance for it. And if it's a really nice car, I got to pay more insurance than the insurance I'm paying for the car I have now. And then I got to keep putting new tires on. And the new tires, you know, are more expensive than the tires I use on the car I have now, and so on. So you find that there's all these compounded things that begin to happen, and so on, through these attachments that we have. And we call all these compounded things the faults of nature, the faults of samsara. Samsara is a Sanskrit name that literally means this ocean of suffering, that no matter what we have, everything is going to change. And those changes we may not be very happy with. You know, it's going to be difficult to be able to do that. If we can maintain a balance in that, that's what we're trying to do. But when we're not working for that balance, and we're just doing things for the sake of doing those things and having those things, and then when those changes come, we're unprepared for them, bang, we get suffering. So it's important to be able to recognize these faults of samsara, these faults of change. So samsara is this ocean of suffering. And we're going to talk more about that as we go on, but I want to be able to complete this discussion tonight. The next thing is the hatred and anger. The antidote for hatred and anger is loving kindness and grace. Hatred and anger, and the antidote is loving kindness and grace. So there's many examples for this. If I'm in the car and I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, and I'm in a hurry to get where I'm going, and I had to slam on my brakes and everything, and I open up the window and I scream at the guy who's cut me off, or maybe I'm really mad, I jump out of the car and I go beating on his window or something like that. And instead of just saying, oh, you know, I'm sure he didn't mean to do it, you know, it wasn't totally intentional, he didn't want to cause an accident. So I have to have some loving kindness, I have to have some grace and say, well, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he's not the jerk that he portrayed himself in being by cutting me off, but, you know, it was an accident. How many people have I cut off? You know, there's been a few, and maybe they've said something about me, and I really didn't mean to cut them off. You know, it was my being unmindful. I was just being selfish, thinking I've got the right of way when somebody else might have the right of way. And so to have that grace. So we say that in order to be able to recognize that something is not what it appears, that anger that I'm having is like looking into a mirror and getting mad at the image I see in the mirror. You know, the image in the mirror is just a reflection of something else, but I'm mad at the image in the mirror instead of being angry with the thing over here. The thing in the mirror I can't change. The thing over here, maybe I got a way of changing it by changing myself. I may not be able to change that over there, but I can change my reaction to it. And if I'm always thinking of loving kindness, if I have a loving, kind heart, if I have a heart full of grace, then that anger is not going to rise up when I'm provoked. Or if it does, I recognize it right away. And I say, oh, I need to take a deep breath. I need to realize that I'm, you know, in a dangerous situation. Something could happen. I need to be able to show grace for myself. And I need to show grace for this other person. So this neutralizes that anger and that hatred. So there's a lot more to it, of course. You know, we're talking about it in general terms right now. But this is an introduction, so we begin with this. The next one is jealousy and envy is the poison, and we deal with that jealousy and envy with fearlessness and unimpededness. So what does that mean? Our jealousy is, or envy, is that we don't have something that we want, or that we have it and we're fearful that we're going to lose it. Jealousy. My girlfriend's talking to somebody else, and boy, has that got me upset. I don't know, they're talking about me or something like that, so, or I'm envious that someone else has a nicer car than I do, and I really want that car or something. So, and why do I want that? Why am I envious of that? Because I'm fearful if I don't have it, I'm not going to like myself, and other people aren't going to like me as much. If I don't have that nice car, I'm not going to attract the kind of attention that I want to attract to myself. So fearfulness is at the root of jealousy and envy. Fearful that I need this self-aggrandizement. If I don't have it, I'm not worthy. The other thing is unimpededness. The other part of this is unimpededness. Unimpededness means that there's no obstacle. I can do it if I want to do it. I can realize that there can be a pathway for me to do these things. But at the same time, I might find that as I'm engaging in that, I realize I'm making a mistake. And instead of continuing the mistake, I say, oh, wow, I wanted this car, I wanted this relationship, I wanted this job, whatever it is, I wanted it so bad, but I realized I don't want it anymore. Some people would continue in that lifestyle because they've invested themselves so much, they've been talking about it so much to other people, and they don't want to show the face of being wishy-washy and changing their mind. So they continue on this, and then they continue to live a lie that they needed to have this, that they wanted to have this. So this is how that jealousy and envy can be in the back of your head and can ruin your life. Instead, they should realize, I can stop this. I'm unimpeded. I can say I made a mistake, and I pull back and I take the other choice, the other path that I had for myself that gives me greater peace, greater happiness. So I'm unimpeded to say, I don't want this. Or I'm unimpeded, I can accomplish this if I want. So, and I do it with fearlessness. So this is the antidote to jealousy and to envy. So the more you think about these things, and this becomes food for your practice, for your meditation. When you sit down to meditate, what are you thinking about? Oh, I'm not going to think about anything. Yes, meditation is no thought. I'm going to turn off all the thought. I'm not going to think about a thing. And I'm sitting here for 20 minutes going, I'm not going to think about a thing. And the thoughts come in. Oh, there's another thought, but I'm not going to think about it and everything. But real meditation, real contemplation is by taking what emotions do arise and being able to apply these wisdom techniques, be able to think these things through, to be able to develop the wisdom, to be able to develop the stability of the contemplation, which then results in no thought. And the meditation arises on its own. If we try to meditate, we can't meditate. But when we exhaust all the mental permutations that we go through with things, if we learn how to focus our attention on these things, see them through, then we exhaust them and then we rest. And then the meditation comes. And the meditation is opening up the heart center. And that's where we wanted to be the whole time. So we can't make it happen. It happens on its own through this process of contemplation. So now the next one, The next poison is greed and pridefulness. Greed and pridefulness is the poison. How do we overcome that? We overcome that through jealousy, through generosity. By giving that which we have, that which we're prideful of, that which we are greedy about, that we share it. Whether it's things in my job, whether it's money that I have, whether it's some possessions I have, whatever it is, time, to share time, to be generous with time. I think we all agree, time is, sometimes we might think is our most precious thing that we have. We never have enough time, but when we see someone that could use some time to sit and talk with, or to be with, or to help, or go to the store for, or something like that, sometimes is the best generosity that you can give them. So through the generosity of that which we have, of that which we're prideful of, that generosity, we see that we always have more of it. We can't exhaust all that stuff that we have. And if we had the talent, if we had the skillful means to be able to acquire those things, we haven't lost that because we gave it away, or gave the results of that away, or some of it away. It's still coming to us. We can still get it, only to give more of it away. And we see, how gratifying this is. Do you have more pleasure in receiving something than you do in offering something and giving something to somebody? And when it really, is kind of hurts a little bit, I've got $10. That's all I got. But if I give $5 to this person, that's going to hurt me. But meanwhile, it gives me pleasure because that person takes that $5 and says, "Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful. I can go get, a meal. I can do something important with that $5. So do we have greater pleasure from giving to others than by receiving? That's the fundamental question. And be honest with yourself about that question. Think about it. And when you're in the next situation where you can have a choice to be generous or not, think about how you be mindful of that choice and how you react in that choice, what you do. And if you make a mistake, if you hold back that $5, so you keep your 10, and then you're out of that situation now, and you think to yourself, for the next 2 days, you're thinking about, I really wish I gave that $5 to that person. I really wish I did that. And I'm thinking about it. And that's interrupting your peace, isn't it? So the next opportunity you have, you can make amends for that. You can say, that opportunity is gone, but this next time I can be generous with this other person. And maybe it's not to give them the $5, but to take the opportunity to be generous when before you were selfish. And that negates it, or it neutralizes that. And then that anxiety, that constant pressure in your head that's making you think, I was a bad person. Now you can say, I'm really not a bad person. I was selfish, but I know I don't have to be that way anymore. So this is how we change. It's a very practical solution. All of this is very practical. All of these antidotes are very practical antidotes to these poisons, to these emotions. So Buddhism is a very practical system. That's what we're learning to do. So now the last one is the ignorance and the delusion that we create for ourselves. And how do we overcome ignorance and delusion? The antidote for that is education. So being able to say, I don't know something, I would like to know something. And instead of creating a false story for myself that I have to, that then becomes a ring through my nose, I have to be following this lie that I've told to myself and to others and so on. I educate myself and I can say, well, how can I avoid this? How can I get out of this delusion now? That's one thing. By owning up to the mistake I made, by owning up to the lies that I told and say, I'm not going to tell that lie anymore. I may not be able to go back to the people that I told that to years ago, but I'm not going to do it anymore. But on the other hand, if you had the choice to tell somebody something, that you do it, that you correct it. I'll tell you a story, this is all about confession many times, and I worked in a place and I had plenty of opportunity to take things and put in my car and take home and so on. And there was something that I did. I took something and I really forgot about it over time. I deluded myself that I rationalized it was mine to take. So years and years went by. And then when I retired and I really got into my meditation more and more and more and everything, I had more time and everything, that situation came up. I had suppressed it for years and it came up. And Lance, do you remember that you did that and everything? I said, oh my goodness, I always wanted to pay for it. I always wanted to have some way to make up for that because it never settled with me, but I was very successful being able to rationalize it away, But now I'm faced with that truth. What am I going to do? Well, the very next opportunity I had, I made an opportunity where I went and I said, here is, payment for that. I did that many years ago. I'm very sorry that I did that. And I told him the story, that I put it aside. I rationalized it and I forgot about it. I suppressed it. But now I can't live with myself as being a free person until I repay the debt. So maybe it's a debt at work. Maybe it's a debt. It's not a possession, but it's a chore that you learned or something that you learned from somebody. This job that I've got, I couldn't be doing this job if I didn't have teachers to help me to do this job. And whenever I see my teachers, I thank them very much for those things that they taught me, and be able to remind them that there's many people who receive the same blessings that they gave to me, and maybe they don't recognize it that way. Maybe they're not giving it to you that way, but I'm sure that in somewhere in their life, they will recognize that, they will realize that. But if nowhere else, at least in my life, I recognize that, and I thank you very much. So to rejoice for these things, for these blessings, is all part of this education and being able to apply the education. One way of looking at it is, in ignorance, there's an analogy or a metaphor that it's darkness. And education is flipping the light switch, turning on the light, bringing in the wisdom, bringing in the truth. And it may be to some degree painful. It may hurt your pride a little bit. It may cost you some money a little bit, whatever. But the freedom that it gives you, that comes from that, is priceless. So nobody said that Buddhism was easy. Nobody said that spirituality is easy. It is a work in progress. It becomes a lifestyle that we have an aspiration for. Would I rather be like, I don't know, I don't want to disparage anybody, but a politician or, some ne'er-do-well, very rich person or something like that? Would I rather be like them, or would I rather be like Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, the father of modern India? Who would I rather be? Would I rather be like the Pope, or would I rather be like Lucifer, the devil? You know, all these things that you can make up your own people in your minds and so on like that. And who would you rather be? You know, would you rather be a virtuous person, or would you rather be an unwholesome person? Would you rather be racked with anxiety, or would you rather be free and simple? So these are fundamental questions that we all have to ask ourselves. And the Buddhism gives us a framework in which to do this, to ask the questions, and then to heal from it. To heal from it, because we all have done things. You know, we call them defilements. We've all have these defilements of blockages, of obscurations, of emotions, and so on. And so it's like an illness. But the medicine Buddha, his medicine is the Dharma Elixir. And the Dharma is the teaching of all these things. The 5 poisons are Dharma teachings. The 5 antidotes are a Dharma teaching. So we see all this is all part of the Dharma, of realizing, recognizing the truth of what our life is, who we are, what we've created for ourselves, and what we're going to do with it. So, any questions or comments? Are you, is it good? Anybody good? Is it bad? You know, anybody have say, oh, Lance, I'm not interested in this.
Well, I think that we have every day we have an opportunity to practice. Almost every hour of every day, if you're around people, you're presented with the challenges of to your emotions and all the poisons. So if you're mindful of this and have this in your heart, you're going to see the world coming at you, and you're going to have the opportunity to practice. And
what are you practicing?
Well, in terms of you're not becoming attached to your visceral emotions, as is one way that I would express it. If someone challenges you or offends you in some way, either directly or indirectly, even if it's simply something in the news, you can react. We have the opportunity to react every day because of the world that is swirling around us. And it's not that you don't care about it and it doesn't matter, but you understand, how you can be most effective. And you can be most effective, and from what I believe that I have learned in our practice here, is in how I change myself and how I govern my own reactions to it. I'm not going to change the vast world around me, except to the extent that I change myself. And to me, that's the practice. And we have that opportunity every day. Anytime you turn on the television or anytime you go out into the world, there will be events or things that occur that give you the opportunity to practice.
Well thought out and well expressed. You're correct. That was very good. Yes, and that's contemplative meditation, thinking it through, posing a question, having something come up, and being able to take it apart and put it back together again. Meditation is the result of that process of taking things apart and putting it back together again. And as you put things back together again, you say, oh, I don't need this part. I don't need that. Oh, that's where I really want to be. And this really works with that. So it's going through and simplifying. It's like doing a deep cleaning in your home. This is doing a deep cleaning in your brain, your body, that opens up your heart. So we say that when we have our physical pointed one, when we sit in the meditation position, right now I'm sitting with my legs crossed on a cushion on the floor. This is the best place to be, very balanced and so on. And we'll talk about this when we talk about meditation, but this, my body is completely relaxed. So when my body's relaxed, I'm not thinking about it. I'm not having pain or discomfort or anything like that. And then I'm able to concentrate. Now, my mind, my brain is, if I'm thinking one pointedly on understanding what quietude is, for example, or what my practice is and what gets in the way of my practice, if I'm thinking about that, if I'm contemplating that, I get to a point of one-pointed mindfulness of that. And then both my physical body, my intellect, both relax. And it's like a key that goes into a lock and opens up the heart center. And the heart center is where our love is. That's where our loving kindness is. That's where our compassion is. That's where our empathetic joy is. That's where our equanimity is. It's where our bodhicitta is. The holy enlightened mind is here in the heart center. These thoughts up here, this is where our emotions are. That's what develops the emotions. They block up the heart. That's why, they say, oh, you're thinking with your heart. You're thinking with your emotions. Well, it's not exactly true. You're thinking with your emotions, but the emotions are blocking up the heart. When you can release the emotions, the true nature of the heart opens up. When you have an experience of pure love, where does it come from? It comes from here. And when it comes from here, is the result of having thought about something to the point of exhausting it. And all that's left is that love. So I'm sure that you've all had opportunity to experience that many times in your life. And now maybe pointing it out, maybe you'll see it much more. And when the heart is being blocked up because of the emotions, you'll have the aspiration to want to release that blockage, to free yourself, to liberate yourself from that blockage. So that's all part of the Buddha Dharma teachings, to recognize that, understand why it's there, and how to release it, how to clean it up. Okay. We're nearing the end of our session here. I think just as a teaser, I think I would just like to mention that one of the things, let me put it this way, the definition of Buddha is a Sanskrit word. So it's thousands of years old. And it means literally in Sanskrit, awakened one. And what are we awakened to? What is the awakened one awakened to? The truth. All things around us, nature, all of this, and understanding it in its own terms as for what it is, and recognizing that there is this inexpressible essence that is within ourselves that is to be aware of as well, awakened to as well. So when we remove these blockages, all that's left is that true nature. So we're trying to get to that point. So Buddha means awakened one. And Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, recognized that. And he said that we all have that Buddha within ourselves. And what we're trying to do is to free ourselves from the emotions, the things that block it up. So this mind of the Buddha, this true mind, is full of wisdom. Wisdom that we have because we are already Buddha. And what happens when we fit this key into the lock that opens up the lock, that opens up our true nature, and we're sitting in this quietude, thoughts can come up. And the thoughts that can come up can be very wise thoughts, full of wisdom. And you say, where did that come from? And sometimes you can be in a conversation and you're explaining something to somebody. And all of a sudden you're using words and saying things that, where did that come from? Because you have that true nature within yourself. You have that wisdom within yourself. And when you are, narrowing down into that one-pointed mindfulness, that wisdom, that truth just can't help itself. It just comes up and so on. And you say, oh, wow. And so it's all there like that. So this wisdom and Buddha's genius, Shakyamuni Buddha, his genius was that he was able to develop this system. Because, if we, all of us here, what is 9 people here right now, or 10 people here right now, none of us have been able to think of this on our own. And we're all adults, we've all been through a lot of changes, and none of us have figured this out by ourselves. We needed help. He did it all by himself. He had help to learn how to meditate and so on like that. But he was the one who opened up these doors and allowed this come up and then to articulate all this. And of course, we know that, there is a quality of intelligence that has been at work with this. It's very practical. It's very logical. So it's not just magic or anything like that, not just spiritual magic. So his articulation of this, he was able to break down for us in order that we can recognize what this wisdom is. So these 5 poisons were the poisons that contaminate those wisdoms. The antidotes are the antidotes to those poisons to neutralize those poisons. Then if you do that, what's left? Wisdom. So let me point out to you, and we're going to come back and talk about it again next week, but I want to introduce you to this, and that is that with desire, the antidote here, we develop the wisdom of discriminating awareness, that we make choices as to what we're going to pay attention to. And we're going to pay attention to virtue. We're going to look at non-virtue. And we're going to be able to discriminate between the two and decide when we need to do this and when we need to do that. When we need to meditate and when we need to go to work and earn some money. When we need to clean the house. When we need to help somebody else. So this wisdom of discriminating awareness. This hatred results in mirror-like wisdom, that we see all things as appearances, as like a mirror, things and appearances, that everything is illusory, that all this stuff is just compounded stuff that we'll explain later, but we're chasing stuff that is just illusory, just stuff that we fabricate in our feeble minds, our intellectual minds, that's like a mirror. So we let go of it through loving kindness and grace. Then jealousy and envy, we develop the all-accomplishing wisdom. The all-accomplishing wisdom is that all things are already here for us. Everything is what we need to be. We just need to be able to be at peace with it and recognize that by doing this for other beings, stabilizes this within ourselves. If we're always selfish with these things that we're trying to accomplish, then we're missing the opportunity to help other beings, to share with other beings. And that is a fundamental part of being selfless. We want to be selfless. We don't want to be selfish. So all-accomplishing wisdom we develop. Then greed and pride results in the wisdom of equanimity, of seeing all things as the same, seeing all things in a balance. And that balance can shift. Sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 40-60. There's all different kinds of things, and it changes throughout our lives. But there is this wisdom of equanimity, this wisdom of sameness, that we're all the same. We're all made up of the same things, the same physical things. We have the same intellectual thoughts, and we have the same spirit of the Buddha. And then the last one is the ignorance delusion. And this is the all-pervading wisdom. The all-pervading wisdom that penetrates everywhere and everything. And the best analogy for all-pervading wisdom is, like right now, I look outside and it's dark outside because the sun is not shining. But when the sun shines, the sun comes into my home and it gets into the closet, it gets into the deep recesses, it gets into the corners, it gets into underneath furniture, and so it penetrates everywhere. And that's like the wisdom. The wisdom is like that. It penetrates everywhere. It's like the sun. So we have that wisdom within ourselves. We have those 5 wisdoms within ourselves. They are the wisdoms of the 5, of the holy enlightened mind, the Bodhisattva. So what we're doing is we're bringing them out into the light so that we can see them, understand them, the what, the why, and the how. So that's it for tonight. And we have still one more thing to do. Does anybody have any other questions or comments now? Okay, I hope this is helpful to you. So
I
yes.
just want to say this is very helpful and very illuminating. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. I hope it's not too long. You know, an hour is not enough time. And an hour and a half really isn't enough time. 2 hours, I think we can accomplish something. So there's 3 parts to every one of our Buddhist practices. So the first part is our motivation, saying the opening prayers, reciting the opening prayers to remind ourselves of our aspiration for the enlightenment of all sentient beings, not just ourselves, that we are doing this for the benefit of others. That's the first part. The second part is, in this case, it was this talk that we had, this teaching, this conversation that we had, so this is the second part. It can be a study that we have on our own at home. We say, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to do something like that, you know, going over my notes, something like that. Whatever it is, our practice, our doing yoga practices, whatever, that is the main body of the session. Then when we're finished that, the third part is what we call the dedication. Each one of us right now is different than we were at 7 o'clock. 2 hours ago, you were a person who had a certain set of thoughts and imagination and activities and so on. But now in these 2 hours, you've heard some things that maybe you haven't heard before, or maybe you've had some thoughts as a result of the things that you heard that you never had before. So in that regard, you are different. In that regard, that old person is dead, and this new person is reborn. So we've gone through this death and rebirth. And with this rebirth, with this new person that we now have, we've accumulated some wisdom. And maybe we've accumulated some skillful means, some way in which we want to actualize this. We've been thinking about, well, how can I change my life? How can I do these things in life? How can I actualize this wisdom? So we're developing this merit as a result of that, this merit. And this merit of this virtue like accumulates within ourselves. And now we are taking this merit and we are dedicating it to the enlightenment of other beings. We're not keeping it for ourselves. We're not selfishly holding on to it and saying, oh, I'm a new person. I've been reborn. This is great. I'm wonderful now. I'm on the path. This is great. No, we're making ourselves humble, and we're saying, I'm going to let this flow right through me, and I'm going to offer it to all sentient beings that they may attain whatever degree of merit, whatever degree of wisdom, whatever degree of enlightenment that I have attained, or any of us all together have attained, we're offering to all beings. So this is a very, very, very important part, that at the conclusion of any of these practices, teachings, whatever that we do the dedication for the enlightenment of all other beings. So we do that by reciting our dedication prayers that are on, we're going to do one prayer here. It'll take a couple more minutes and then we'll be finished. So it's on page 21. This is called the Dedication Prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun, who is the founder of our lineage. So there's going to be some words here that you're probably not going to be familiar with, and we will explain those in times coming up. But nevertheless, please listen and enjoy this prayer. Recite it if you've got the book, please. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, Yogins, Yoginis, and Dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the 3 times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or a Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May by the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very, very much for joining us.
Thanks, Lance.
Thank you, Lance.
Okay, you're welcome. I hope to see you again next
Thanks,
Monday night, same time, same channel.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thank you.